Welcome back to Silicon Wafers. Is Russia's hybrid war on Europe a precursor to a full incursion on European territory or even the invasion of a European country? This is Silicon Wafers today, why Russia is probing and testing Europe, how hybrid attacks work, and what happens if the Kremlin pushes further escalation to a full invasion, and how we can deter it. Well, let's start why the probing is intensifying. Moscow is stress testing Europe's seams, pulling at the threads to see if the fabric of our institutions and resilience will unravel. But it is conducting this below the threshold of open warfare because hybrid pressure is cheaper, it's deniable, and it is strategically useful. Sub-threshold does not trigger a direct armed response, but can also achieve Russia's strategic objectives without that direct confrontation. It's a war sandbox for testing and learning. Think of it as a toolkit of rolling lab experiments in limited aggression. Sabotage, arson, cyber, GPS jamming, grey fleet shenanigans at sea, drones in NATO airspace, and influence operations that launder Kremlin narratives through local proxies, compliant channels, and criminal networks. The International Institute for Strategic Studies sums up the strategy bluntly. Russia is waging an unconventional war on Europe. That's from an IISS research paper, August 2025. The EU's High Representative put the political frame on it this summer. Persistent, malicious activities that are part of a hybrid campaign aimed at undermining the security, resilience, and democratic foundations of the EU. That is from a Council of the EU statement, July 18th, 2025. From London to Vilnius, investigators say the GRU has adapted after mass diplomatic expulsions, recruiting cutouts, agents online, and paying in crypto. The sabotage operations are so numerous and widespread that a new one is uncovered and reported on every week or two. The Insider wrote in a joint investigation. That's from July 2024. And we know the pace of these campaigns has only increased since this was written. So, what is the hybrid toolset and what is happening? Well, first of all, there is sabotage and arson cells. Here's a fresh example. Today, Poland and Romania announced arrests linked to an alleged Russia-directed plan to send exploding parcels to Ukraine. This mirrors earlier plots that used Europe's parcel networks to test airport and logistics vulnerabilities. Polish officials say dozens tied to hostile intelligence services have been detained this year. Romania's DIICOT said authorities have prevented new sabotage acts on their national territory and that the two suspects acted under direct coordination of some representatives of Russia's secret services. That was reported by Reuters October 21st this year. AP adds some detail. Two Ukrainians were detained in Bucharest over devices disguised in parcels. A third was held near Warsaw, part of a broader sabotage campaign intended to intimidate and destabilize. That's from AP News, October 21st, 2025. Investigative reporting has laid out the patterns since spring: arson at logistics depots feeding Ukraine, attempted strikes on defense-linked factories, and plots against critical infrastructure. A Medusa roundup notes charges in a London warehouse fire case and a surge of irregular attacks that track with Moscow's battlefield fortunes. There has to be a cost to all this, argues analyst Seth Jones on deterring this activity. Well, that's from March in Medusa this year. IISS's dataset finds that incidents quadrupled from 2023 to 2024, with energy, communications, logistics, and government targets prominent amongst those listed. Well, secondly, there are drones and airspace probes. This month, Poland accused Russia of sending a swarm of small drones from a single launch site. Tactically stupid and counterproductive, said Foreign Minister Radoslaw Sikorski, but useful nonetheless for testing NATO's radar picture and its reaction loops. That's according to The Guardian, October 15th, 2025. Across northern Europe, drone sightings near ports, power stations, and military areas have spiked. ACLED has tracked nearly 60 drone overflight incidents since 2022 in suspected Russia-linked activity. Then there is GPS and GNSS jamming and navigation attacks. A Spanish Air Force jet carrying the defense minister experienced jamming near Kaliningrad. There is a real threat, they said. We have suffered this interference, she said after landing in Lithuania. That's from Reuters, September 24th this year. Aviation authorities around the Baltic report chronic GNSS interference. That is dangerous because it stacks risk on top of busy civilian and military air corridors. That's from Reuters and the Defence Minister's reporting 2025. Then there are cyber campaigns and criminal proxies. The UK and partners have repeatedly attributed spear phishing, ransomware, and data theft ops to Russian intelligence fronts such as Star, Cold, and Forest Blizzard. London's line on this is that it condemns malicious cyber activity by the Russian intelligence services. That was a statement issued in May 2024. But I sincerely hope they are going beyond just condemning it, but actually trying to confront it head on. MI5 chief Ken McCallum's warning fits the broader map. The GRU in particular is on a sustained mission to generate mayhem on British and European streets. We've seen arson, sabotage, and more. Well, why does the Kremlin do this? Coercion, of course, and cost imposition. It wants to raise the political and financial cost of arming Ukraine, create fatigue in electorates exposed to fires, outages, and flight disruptions. ISS states that the aim is to destabilize European governments, undermine public support for Ukraine, and weaken the collective ability of NATO and the EU to respond. Again, that's from the IISS report of August this year. Deniability via the gig economy tradecraft is an important aspect. Online recruiting, paying through crypto, using non-Russian cutouts. Lots of small ball plots, enough to distract and divide and threaten, but not break through to the broader public consciousness or grab media headlines. Well, that's from The Insider and IISS. So shaping the battle space. What Russia's trying to do is test defences, normalise transgressions of these rule of laws and sovereign borders, and keep options open for later escalation under the cover of accidents or criminal networks. Again, we're back to that deniability. So how could this play out? Here are 4 realistic scenarios pulled from various reports and the media for how the hybrid war could go to the next level. Scenario 1, winter energy grind, coordinated arson and cyber hits on grid components, gas storage sites and maritime connectors. Targeted GPS spoofing in the Baltic, deniable accidents at ports handling Ukraine-bound kit. Reuters flagged the hybrid risks that could leave Europe's energy consumers out in the cold this winter. Again, this hybrid attack on energy infrastructure and logistics would have a huge impact on consumers and electorates. Scenario 2, parcel bomb scale-up. More sophisticated IEDs sent through third country couriers to logistics nodes and diaspora groups supporting Ukraine, raising casualty risk and forcing costly security protocols while shutting down European air logistics. This week's arrest in Poland and Romania shows that this is very much a live method that is being tested by Russian intelligence. Scenario 3, sea lanes and seabed. Damage or accidental strikes on undersea cables and interconnectors, telecoms and power in the North and the Baltic Sea, use of grey fleet tankers to mask movements, or stage collisions that create diplomatic smog. Combine this with drone attacks at scale. Medusa cites the recent cable incidents and ISS report on undersea targets. Again, this one is aimed at causing the maximum confusion, the maximum disruption, while still having an element of plausible deniability. And then there's scenario 4. Airspace and border friction, more multi-drone incursions, spoofed distress calls, or mis-ID'd aircraft skirting NATO airspace. This is engineered to produce a political crisis and test the alliance rules of engagement. It could also shut down European civilian airspace for hours, days, possibly weeks, depending on the intensity. Poland's recent drone episode is just a taster of this. Sikorsky called it tactically stupid and counterproductive, but this may form a pattern of a far larger incursion in the weeks and months to come. Could Moscow, however, go full scale against Europe? What are the probabilities? So short term, they are considered to be low, but not totally negligible. NATO's Rob Bauer has cautioned we have to realise it's not a given that we are at peace. Well, he issued that statement in January 24, and we've come a long way on the escalatory ladder since then. In the medium term, it is rising if deterrence decays and fails. Germany's chief of defense warned Russia could be ready militarily to attack NATO in 5 to 8 years. That warning was issued on April 18th, 2024, and again we are far further down that route now. Some believe that this time frame may be far sooner, based on rapidly escalating drone incursions that we've seen in 2025. Northern allies say the window to rearm and harden the European defensive stance is now. Estonia's intelligence service assesses the threat is long-term, and Russia is rebuilding mass while learning to layer in drones and strike systems. That's from the Estonia Foreign Intelligence Yearbook, December 24. In practice, most European services still judge that a direct, deliberate attack on NATO in the immediate horizon is unlikely if the alliance sustains support for Ukraine and visibly raises the costs for any Kremlin adventurism. Well, that's taken from multiple assessments and summarized by Radio Free Europe and IISS. But there are many variables that could accelerate Putin's calculus about whether to scale up hybrid operations or even direct confrontations. Regime fragility is maybe the largest and most important, and this is accelerating with a brittle economy, battlefield stalemate, and deteriorating energy situation. Also, the projected budget deficit for Russia in 2026 is rising rapidly, and actual battlefield setbacks may kick in over the winter. All this may push Putin to desperate measures, propel him to increase his appetite for risk and towards direct kinetic confrontation. The stance of the US and China is also critical in this calculus. If China supports bolder action and is willing to supply Russia accordingly, and the US takes a back seat, in fact adopts an appeasing tone, then the risks start to accumulate for a shorter term strike on Europe in one form or another. Well, let's wrap this up by looking at deterrence. What works? What should we be doing? Well, we should harden the defensive stance of Europe and visibly invest in military deterrence. We should be arresting and attributing, moving faster from intel to handcuffs, and name the sponsors of sabotage and terror. The EU's new hybrid threat sanction regime now targets tangible assets and GR units behind the sabotage. That's from a Council of the EU framework from 2024, updated in October 25. We should also starve the proxies. Europol says that Russian services leverage organized crime, treat those networks as hostile infrastructure so we can work with our existing police networks, all the while taking out some of this Russian capability or trying to neutralize it. Well, that's summarized by The Guardian from a Europol report of March this year. We should protect the grid and the seabed, fund 24/7 patrols, seabed sensing, and rapid repair stockpiles for internet and power cables, require cyber and physical hardening of security standards, for ports, depots, and parcel hubs, as well as protecting key communications and logistics lines. And we must own the escalatory ladder, pursue proportionate, legal counter operations below the threshold. As Medusa puts it, there has to be a cost for Russian aggression. That cost can be explicitly stated, that cost could be indirect and below the radar, taking Russia on using some of the tools of its own game. That's from a Medusa article in March this year. But we must also sustain the political centre ground. Hybrid warfare feeds on division and extremism. Sweden's civil defence message, prepare society, was stark and important for a reason, and NATO's message should be consistent: prepare for war to prevent war. This was taken from a very important, very impactful Swedish government speech in January 2024, quoted by Rob Bauer. We must also keep arming Ukraine. Every air defense battery in Kharkiv, Kiev, Chernihiv, Sumy, Odessa, and right across Ukraine. Every interdicted Russian oil depot reduces Moscow's bandwidth for mischief elsewhere. The EU, UK, and Nordic drone wall or space shield initiatives will only work if paired with ammo production, sanctions on the shadow fleet, and legal seizures of Russian state assets to be used for Ukraine's defence and reconstruction. This is from a recent European defence planning coverage and statements from across EU institutions. This is our war to lose. If we fail to support Ukraine, to push back against Russia, if we fail to rearm, if we fail to get our populations on board, if we fail to deter Russia, then surely war is coming to Europe. It may start as a hybrid war on steroids, but will quickly scale up from there. Before we move on to the next question, I'd like to make a personal recommendation that I know you will appreciate. You may have seen my interview last week with the producer of the film series Kiev of Mine, Ronnie Apteker. Well, I've partnered with them to help raise awareness of what I believe is an important series of films made for a Western audience to help break through absurd stereotypes about Ukraine, some of which, of course, are amplified by Russian propaganda. You can watch these films for free now. Details in a second. Kiev of Mine is a documentary series about Ukraine's extraordinary capital, which I had the privilege to visit for the first time in January this year. The film production began in 2018, and of course much has changed since then. It's now 2025, and the story is far from over. Kiev of Mine is a fast-paced, beautifully filmed, humorous, fun, insightful, heartbreaking, moving, and hopeful work. The very antithesis, in fact, of a doom-laden and worthy wartime documentary. This is a work that is extraordinarily uplifting. My friend, operator Starsky, says the film is made with so much love. The film series will make you laugh and cry. It's the only film about Ukraine that began before the war yet has traced lives through the tumultuous times, and which follows the lives of more than a dozen Ukrainians in real time. This is an historic period told through highly personal and emotive stories from Kiev's days of emerging prosperity after the Maidan Revolution through COVID and the full-scale invasion. This film is a breath of fresh air. Ukraine deserves a better conversation in the world, one that isn't centered around war, says Jolyon Ellis, filmmaker on Kiev of Mine. It's hard not to argue with that, and the filmmakers have fully delivered on this promise. This is essential watching for anyone who calls themselves pro-Ukrainian, but I think it's also vital to get friends, colleagues, and family to watch it too, because the reality is few people have a vivid impression of Ukraine or any direct connection with its people. War is inhumane and abstract. Building an alternative perception is essential for engaging the world with the importance of Ukraine's struggle. A final word from our partners, the makers of Kiev of Mine. All three films are now available to watch for free on YouTube. Please check out the links to the dedicated website, which tells you more about the film, its subjects, and the filmmakers. Also in the description is a link to the YouTube channel where you can watch the films now. Do let us know in the comments what you think of them and if they inspire you as much as they have inspired me.